WTF Wednesday. You can bring along a topic to discuss, but you need to explain what the WTF is. Does anybody have a WTF that they want to talk about?
What's the fascination, maybe?
Ooh,
and I've been thinking and noodling around planning and planning styles, because some of the frustrations that I think people find with planning is being told that they have to do it in a certain way when that way doesn't work for their brain. Now, from my perspective, one of the things I've always leaned on the PMOs I've worked with for is their great planning ability, because my planning style is somewhat scattergun, shall we call it politely. I can see the big picture, I can see the detail. So with the different planning styles, it occurred to me that as PMOs, frequently we are planning with people who plan with very different styles, and how do we bring that together, and what are your thoughts on it? And it's kind of a curiosity question.
Right. Okay. So when you're asking what's the fascination, what are you questioning the fascination with or about?
I'm fascinated by how individual planning styles impact a project and program planning process. Because if we all plan in a way that's very natural for us, it's not going to be natural for everybody else. So how do we bring people's individual strengths to that planning process?
So planning styles, I've often said to people, I don't care how you do it, as long as we get to some that we can then take a holistic view of.
Yeah, I would say I've used a few approaches that have been successful. The two main ones, I think, are the sort of post-its on a board type approach, where you would stick the tasks on there and maybe you would write some numbers on for things like effort and duration, and maybe write people's names on, or that kind of stuff. You might use different coloured post-its for different types of task. The difficulty, I think, with that sort of thing comes with how you represent the dependencies. So you could draw the dependencies on something like a flip chart or a whiteboard or something like that, but almost straight away you end up moving them around. Maybe you could put things in vertical order, in the order that they happen. So there's some value in doing that. Another approach that I've used reasonably successfully is by entering things directly into a scheduling tool like MS Project. And people often say that's a really bad way to do things. That's not my experience, because I find that you can model things on the fly quite well doing it that way. So you can create dependencies between tasks straight away, and you can take a phase and you can split it down into its components and that kind of stuff. But you can capture what you have in that moment, and you can create quite a useful piece of collateral. I mean, it's not a final plan by any means, but it's a way to create an outline plan that you can then add detail to at a later date.
So that, for me, that is really interesting, because you preface the second way with some people find it good, some people don't, and that for me is the crux of the problem. I can think more easily in the post-it note example that you gave. I can kind of get my thoughts out that way more easily, whereas I know there are a lot of people I've worked with who find that a second way much easier. And I think, my view is that comes down to their natural way of accessing their brains and kind of grabbing that information and being able to plan. So as somebody who needs it to be quite visual, having those post-it notes that I can pull off the board and put somewhere else and then use to generate other things that I need to do, kind of in a more mind mappy, organic-y kind of way, rather than following something. I'm not great with that structure initially when I'm doing the thinking. Once I've done the thinking, the structure's great. But I can't get straight into that structure. For me, there's a step in between that needs to happen, which is a bit more swirly.
I agree with that. When I've been presented with a project-based plan like that, or if I've attempted to present that kind of thing to non-project people, it kind of sort of shuts them down in terror. I think.
Yeah, I would. Bits to that. There is the terror of the tool. That if you don't know the tool, any tool, it's kind of scary.
But having to have that structure,
it's the structure as well. So for some people, it's a double terror.
Yes.
Yeah, I would add that when I've used that second approach, the one with entering things directly into MS Project, that person is usually a project person. They're usually an expert in what needs to happen, and usually it sort of takes the form of an interview. I'd say, right, what needs to happen first, and then what needs to happen after that, and I'm constructing it with them sitting next to me and them saying, oh yes, but it's not the start of that task, it's the end of the task, or whatever. So we, you do the linkages as appropriate and what have you. So it's
that works really well.
It does in that context, yeah. It's not always appropriate.
Well, I wonder then if there's a bit partly around the planning style of the person you're doing it with and the type of the project. So if it's something that they've done before, so they know what to do, it's kind of what Eddie O'Bang would call a paint by numbers project. It's relatively straightforward to get it straight into the tool. If it's something that's a bit swirlier, a bit less clear what it is you're trying to plan around, which is more typical of the kind of things I come across in the change management world than the project world, then maybe you need a different approach.
What's the fascination with rigid approaches? It's like everything almost that we talk about in the project change space is use the approach that is most appropriate in that situation and tailor it to it, rather than just saying one approach is the best approach, therefore you should use that.
So there you go. WTF Wednesday. Tune in, people, for more.